The COVID pandemic has wreaked havoc across industries. Just like others, the clothing industry finds itself in the midst of an unprecedented adversity. The outlets are all closed. While the e-commerce channel is open, clothing doesn't figure in the list of essential goods that people would spend their money on. As a result, the large global fashion brands have seen their profits falling by as high as 90% in 2020. The ones impacted the most by this are the millions of invisible contractual workers in the garment industry. Through the apathy towards these workers, global fashion brands have turned their economic crisis into a humanitarian crisis. In this video, I am going to explain how these brands abandoned their workers during COVID. Hi, I am Praveen and I welcome you to my channel. During your visits to the malls, you would have noticed the various global clothing brands that keep increasing every time you visit. These brands, mostly American or European, are the true symbols of globalization, getting their clothing made from various parts of the developing world. Behind their facade, there lies a dark web of exploitation in the way they get their clothing made. The clothes for these brands are sourced through suppliers that get a part of the whole of garments made through their factories where they employ contractual labor. The production of clothing increased drastically during the last decade. If you take the cost alone, in India, the price of clothing has been very slow to rise compared with the other consumer goods. But if you look at the developed markets like the US and UK, the price of clothes has actually fallen in the same period. This has been made possible by the way the large brands are controlling the prices and dictating terms for the suppliers. They are disproportionately large compared to the suppliers and are the lead firms in this ecosystem. Over years of mergers and acquisitions, they have only been growing further in size. The suppliers, on the other hand, are dispersed across developing countries. This gives rise to a power asymmetry and a classic example for oligopsony. A survey mentions that 52% of suppliers sign contracts to produce goods at a loss. The primary reason they do so is to secure future orders. This price squeeze results in inadequate low wages for the workers. On another hand, as these companies are moving towards a fast fashion model, they want the garments to be moved out quickly from designing to retail. They squeeze the suppliers further to work with shorter lead times. This causes increased work intensity with long work hours, no leaves, and poor working conditions. When COVID happened, it further damaged the life of these workers. Most of them were terminated and were left with no option to put food on the table. This COVID crisis developed in three phases. First, there was the crisis of raw materials procurement. In January 2020, many cities in China went under lockdown. For garment suppliers, it dramatically impacted the availability of raw materials like fabric. The price of the raw materials increased, but the lead firms did not adjust the buying prices to compensate the suppliers. Rather, they penalized the suppliers for the delay. Second, there was the crisis of buyers' late payments. As the COVID-19 pandemic began to hit the sales of the brands, suppliers reported increased delays in payments. They invariably passed this on to the workers. Their wages were delayed and many of them were fired. Third, there has been the crisis of buyer cancellations of in-process orders. Buyers began to abruptly cancel not only future orders but orders already in process. Take the case of Primark. They are one of the biggest brands present in nearly 400 locations in Europe. They posted an operating profit of over $1 billion in 2019. Yet they are one of the examples of a buyer that cancelled all its orders with its suppliers. Many buyers are evoking the force majeure clause in their contracts to justify the breaking of their obligation to pay for orders in production. Some experts suggest that Force majeure claims should apply to the party with the most relevant contractual obligation, which in this case would be the factories producing garments. In India alone, around 6.6 million workers are estimated to be impacted by the situation in the garment industry. This number only shows the formally employed workers. In addition to this, there are workers at the bottom of the garment supply chain who are even more vulnerable and easily forgotten. The factories supplying to larger brands engage in subcontracting arrangements with home workers who finish a part of the clothing working from home. Take the case of Tirupur in Tamil Nadu, which is known as the t-shirt factory of the world. Over 200 international brands have the t-shirts produced here. The workforce in Tirupur includes over 40,000 home workers, mostly women, who perform tasks like embroidery and stitching. The factories provide the fabric, but home workers buy thread, needles, and special scissors and also pay for electricity. This is a lot of overhead for little compensation. Stitching one piece could get them a little over a rupee, and they could do only 100 pieces per day. This is a very meager income, but even that earning has come to a halt. There are around 16.3 million informal workers impacted by this in India. Another problem is that governments usually don't recognize home work as employment, and it is a reason for home workers not being able to access social security or to access COVID-19 relief packages extended to businesses and their employees. The brands have also turned a blind eye towards the subcontracting setup. In fact, the suppliers' practice of subcontracting is a direct result of brands' purchasing practices like tight deadlines, fluctuating demand, and pressure to reduce production costs. The brands should include provisions in their agreements that require suppliers to keep a record of home workers and ensure they get minimum wage. They should also be getting access to social security and provident funds. Brands should desist from invoking force majeure to avoid paying for existing orders. There is a need to change the procurement practices of these brands. These changes include order stability that allows for proper planning, timely payments of orders, and full respect for workers' rights. The road to recovery from the pandemic is going to be very long. Estimates suggest that even in the best possible scenario, the garment industry could come back to pre-COVID levels only towards the end of 2022. In the worst case scenario, this could be as late as 2025. In the interim, the large brands should set up funds to support the workers during this period. These companies have enough resources to do that. To give you a perspective, the net wealth of CEOs of the top 5 buyers alone exceeds the value of all Indian garment exports. They should show some solidarity with the factory and home workers in their supply chains during this crisis. Such actions might make the difference between life and death for the home workers and factory workers right now. Consumers are becoming more aware of the plight of the workers in fashion, and momentum is building to end exploitation. In the coming days, consumers will only reward the companies that treat their workers with respect. Would you look for this when you shop with a global brand again? Let me know that in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.